Okay, hello, and welcome to week 8 of Thinking Sociologically. This week we're going to talk about education and educational inequality in the United States. We're going to start with Pierre Bourdieu, sociologist out of France, because he's really sort of the foundational sociological thinker on these ideas of studying the sociology of education and educational inequality. Um, Bourdieu studied French school children in the 1960s. And one of the things that he found led him to theorize that economic and cultural capital of children directly impacts their academic success and their ability to be successful in the classroom. Basically, what he was saying is that schools divide us. They add to and perpetuate existing social inequalities. And that's as true in France as it is here in the United States. So, how does this work? Um, First, when we talk about educational capital, we're talking about this relationship between economic capital and cultural capital. Remember that cultural capital are all of those things that you know, that knowledge that you have as a result of membership in particular cultures, classes, races, or groups. Economic capital is essentially how much income or wealth you can expend to, again, improve your life experiences or life chances. Um, so, economic capital impacts educational inequality by impacting what you have access to. So if you come from a family that has a lot of disposable income or wealth, you can get tutors in foreign languages, perhaps. You could go on vacations to countries where they speak that language and practice it in real time. You can afford to join traveling sports teams and clubs, any kinds of organizations that have dues. You can learn to swim by taking swimming lessons or lessons on a musical instrument that are private and not provided by the school. These are all things that having economic capital allows you to have access to. But because we know everybody in American society doesn't have access to the same economic capital, then there will be educational inequality because people can use that capital to improve their experiences, to um, uh, increase the amount of cultural capital that they have, which Bordeaux told us was really important to academic success. Okay, well, cultural capital then also has to impact educational inequality, and it does so by impacting what we have experienced. Have we tried foods from other cultures? Have we seen movies from other cultures? Do we have knowledge of the history of art? Um, do we know what fork to use at a 7 course seating in a restaurant or at an event? All of those things will impact how you come to the content that you get at school, how well or not you understand it, and are able to interpret what the teacher is asking you to do as a result, be more successful. So economic capital and cultural capital work together to impact our academic success and also tell us something about the amount of educational capital we can extract from the institution of education. And the amount of educational capital that can be extracted is dependent on a lot of things like race, class, gender, and so forth. Um, when also talking about cultural capital impacting educational inequality, you don't want to just think about the cost of particular programs and stuff that we talked about in the economic capital section, but also what the experiences of participating in those programs then does to your ability to be academically successful. I'm not going to go too much into it here because I will talk about it in our discussion section this week, but sociologist Annette Lareau wrote this book called Unequal Childhoods, where she examined the differences in child rearing by class. And one of the things that she found was children from wealthier families were better communicators. They had better skills at advocating for themselves. They knew how to talk to adults better because of the programs and um, different types of things that their family put on them and made sure that they engaged with because they really saw this child as a project. Where, as by comparison, in more working class families, there's not a lot of development of those communication skills and advocacy skills and self awareness skills because you're being ruled more with an iron fist. Do what the parent says, do what the teacher says, don't ask questions, be seen and not heard. And we'll talk in class this week a little bit about how you think that you were raised and how that impacted you. Okay, in 1977, while writing about educational inequality, Pierre Bourdieu said that no institution does more to ensure the social reproduction of inequality than education. And that's in fact because, as we said before, it not only creates these new structures for social inequality to exist, it also perpetuates existing social inequalities by class, by race, and by gender. Um, and one of the ways that we perpetuate social inequality in education is by normalizing the differences. So we come to expect that high schools in suburban areas are going to have better buildings, more teachers with advanced degrees, more programming for the students, more resources, more learning disability advocates, and so on and so forth. Whereas in inner city high schools, we expect to see a lack of teachers, teachers from community programs as opposed to teachers with advanced degrees, not enough textbooks or materials for all of the students to go around and to take home. And we normalize these expectations such that then we expect students that come from these suburban schools to do better on standardized tests, to be more prepared for college, to get better grades than the students in these working class neighborhoods, as opposed to seeing the way that we structure and pay for education in the United States as being the impetus for a lot of these differences, which then get mapped onto the children. These two videos here, I am not going to show in the lecture, but I have included links to them in the pages section on Canvas. Please watch them. There may be questions about them on the exam, and we're going to talk about testing in a second. So testing, I just said we have an exam. I'm sure that my exam isn't the only exam that you will have to take this semester. What is testing? How does it work in this world of educational inequality? What are we really measuring when we ask students to take tests? So first, tests sort, eliminate, and select students in a very specific way that we continue to presume and perpetuate the idea of being objective. But in reality, we have created an entire institution that is revolving around this select, sort, and eliminate process. But in reality, the way that tests sort us is through an understanding of what the test makers want. And generally, the test makers are white, upper to upper middle class men. And so those people that share identities, that share group and cultural membership with the people that are creating the test, that are pulling the ideas and format from the test from their own personal backgrounds are likely to do better. And I want to stop here and say something that I said at the beginning of the course when we were talking about research methods, and that is that test makers, sorry, just like scientists, are humans. And therefore cannot separate themselves from the socialization process. I was talking about this a couple of weeks ago when we talked about race and gender. And so even if a test maker says, well, I created this objective measure of intelligence, or this objective measure of college readiness, or this objective assessment of how much a student learned in this particular class, it's not objective at all. It's rooted in all of the economic, cultural, educational, and human capital that we all hold as individuals. And if that's the case, then they're not actually measuring the things that we say that we're using them to measure. This is important because people who have difficulty on tests, students who have more difficulty on tests, are more likely to drop out of school. And if we have difficulty doing well on tests as related to cultural identities, then you see that it's likely that increase in dropouts is also related to those identities. So let's look at a couple of charts. This first one is high school dropout rates by race from 1967 to 2016. You can see that though fewer people are dropping out of high school just in general across that time frame, and that is as we perpetuate this idea that everybody is supposed to go to college and you have to finish high school to go to college, those numbers start to drop. And as we create an economy that requires a college degree, or at least a high school degree, those numbers start to drop as well. But you can see down in the corner, Hispanic students have the highest dropout rates, Black students have the second highest dropout rates, and white students have the lowest dropout rates. And that doesn't change over that time period. Okay, it also impacts who graduates. So in this chart, these are graduation rates for the academic year 2014 to 2015. You can see that Asian students have the highest graduation rates in that academic year, followed closely by white students. Black and Hispanic students, again, have the lowest graduation rates, which would make sense because we just saw that they had the highest dropout rates. This is just one more chart that shows dropout rates, and in this one, they're trying to emphasize the continued plummeting of Hispanic students' dropout rates over time. But as you can see, much like in that first chart that we looked at, they still dominate the percentage of overall student dropouts in college as well as in high school. Okay, as always, I want you to figure out how these concepts and social issues, concept of education as an institution, social issue of educational inequality, fits into your world and impacts you. So for our active learning exercise today, you're going to do an autoethnographic accounting of your high school. Remember that ethnography is participant observation. Autoethnographic, much like autobiography, is your own experiences. So I want you to think through your own experiences in high school and how your high school was structured, both academically and socially and culturally. Think about what structures and cultures existed or didn't exist, and how those helped or the lack of them hindered your ability to be academically successful there. And we will talk about this in discussion. I will see you then. Bye-bye.